As soon as Mach is ready, Mach is working on his Mach right now. And Mach will be your moderator today. And we got a great panel: Frank, Dave, Jim, and Lew. So we got RSO, maintenance, pilot, and engineers. This will be a great panel. And another pilot being moderated. You ready to go, sir? All right, here we go.
Good morning, folks, and welcome to the March Field Air Museum 2019 SR-71 Symposium. Glad to have everybody here today. Talk about the SR-71, the only operational, sustained Mach 3 aircraft ever in existence. The SR-71 fleet in the 25 plus years that it flew, over 11,000 hours at 3 times the speed of sound. Not sure what I did. Our panel today, Lew Williams, Jim Shelton, Dave Burns, Frankie Stampf, and I'll be your moderator today. Lew, why don't you go tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a dinosaur. I'd like to take you back to 1961. Fastest thing on the inventory was the F-104. It had wings that were supposed to be so sharp on the edge, if you bumped your head, you'd cut yourself. Mayday, 1960. Carry power rolled out of the U-2 over the United Territory. That's the kind of aircraft I was kind of engaged with. I had come out of the military on the crew chief on the F-100. And I kind of stumbled around. Okay, I'm very, very good. Okay, but I stumbled around for a while. In 1961, February 1961, I was privileged to be employed by Lockheed ADP off of the street. Never happened before, I don't think. So I came in there February 1961, and I stepped over the rolling door of building 82. I came in from that day into the future. I walked in and I saw my workstation. It was an A-12 sitting on the ground. Didn't have a hydraulic on it yet. It was still on jacks. Everything was still coming together. People were installing plumbing lines. I was hired in as a research development hydraulic lab technician, and it was our job to functionally test all of the valves and the tubing that had never flown before. Nobody had gone there before because we were the first ones. And so we devised ways to submit the equipment to temperature and to vibration under pressure and for extended periods of time. One of our glorious things that I got the privilege of is when an engineer would bring a valve or some component in and says, make it break, take it to failure. And we had a chance to be boys again and make it break, take it down. And so I had the privilege of working on the A-12 for 2.5 years at Burbank. Then I went to Area 51 with flight tests for about 2.5 years. And for some wonderful reason, I was chosen to be in the field service development, or field service department of the SR-71, and my station after being at the Burbank plant was Beale Air Force Base, where I was embedded in the Air Force for 25 years. So I have cradle to the grave.
Thank you, Lew. Jim Shelton, give us a couple of minutes of your background, please.
Well, I was here in LA, interested in cars and street racing and things of that nature. And if you had a college deferment, you were going to be drafted by age 21. Well, my dad used to take me deep sea fishing out to Long Beach out here, and I'd get seasick. So I said, well, forget the Navy. And I graduated from high school in '53, so I talked to people coming back from Korea, and I said, man, I don't want to march up some snow-covered mountain carrying a rifle, so cross off the Army and the Marines. But then I kept looking at my Hot Rod magazine, and they were advertising come to the Air Force, be a maintenance man in the Air Force. So I said, well, that's for me. But my high school buddy said, hey, they got some kind of program called aviation cadets. They'll teach you to fly airplanes and be an officer. I said, well, that sounds like fun. So take the test, and they said you could be a pilot or a navigator. But I said, I want to be the pilot. I don't want to be a navigator. And went off, and once I started flying, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So the first airplane I flew was the F-86, and ended up in Korea at the last F-86 outfit in the Air Force. We took the airplanes down to Taiwan and turned them over. Then I was in the rotation cycle. All of a sudden I'm sitting in the back seat of a B-47 saying, where did I screw up? Then I wanted to go faster, so I applied for the B-58 program, Sac Swamp 2 bomber at the time, and they had a nice lead-in program for F-102. So you checked out the F-102 for a little bit, then I flew the B-58 for 2.5 years, and then was selected for the SR program. Spent 9.5 years at Yale, at 911 hours in the SR-71. Then they sent me down here to Riverside to work in the Reconnaissance Center of Riverside, and after 2.5 years they wanted to send me to Omaha, Nebraska. Well, I looked at my winter wardrobe, it was all ski clothes, so I said it's time to retire and went to work for the Skunk Works, working on the F-117. So I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Thank you, Jim.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm from Missouri, a little small town called Esther, Missouri, about 65 miles south of St. Louis. And I joined the Air Force in 1970, about 7 months out of high school, to avoid being drafted. So, but I did get my draft notice while I was in basic training, but Air Force took care of that for me. I came in as, after basic training, I went to Shepherd Air Force Base, Texas for aircraft maintenance specialist, jet engine 1 and 2. And so after graduating that, I went to Ramstein Air Base, Germany for 2.5 years. My first aircraft was T-33s, and later worked Transit Alert, where I was also qualified in NATO cross servicing of NATO aircraft. Then I left there in '73, went to Cannon Air Force Base in Mexico on F-111Bs. After 13 months there, I was re-enlisted, and I put in for basic choice on the West Coast. My first choice was McClellan, Mather, and third choice was Beale. I really didn't know what I was getting into. But I got set orders to Beale, arrived in March of '74, and there's this magnificent black airplane flying around. I go, well, that'd be cool to work on that. And I'm going to the squadron, but I also knew they had T-38s too, so I didn't think I'd be on the SR. But when I reported, they said, there it is. And so you qualified the FTD and stuff, and got in the program, became a crew chief. I was in BO for about 5 years when they made a detachment in Okinawa, Japan, at Kagina Air Base. I was transferred there for 3 years. And then I went from there consecutive overseas to Spain-Dahlem Air Base, Germany, working F-4Es and F-4Gs. And then after 3 years there, to Davis Mountain Air Force Base, Tucson, Arizona. Wonderful assignment. I worked OE-37s, Super Tweets, and then later we transitioned to A-10s. And I was assigned to the 23rd Task Tactical Air Support Squadron. We were forward air control, that was our mission. And I retired in 1990, worked for U.S. Customs for about 18 months through a contract surveyor. Then I got on an A-Mark, the Boneyard, and worked 6 years there. Put an aircraft in storage, and then I was laid off, went back to St. Louis. I also hold an A&D mechanic for FAA, and I worked for Mid-Coast Aviation, and later Jet Aviation, working on corporate style aircraft, Gulfstreams, Falcons Bombardier aircraft.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Frank Stampf. I'm obviously a lot younger than the rest of you guys here, because my PSR was not near as lengthy as your guys. In fact, the guy that I was recruited with in the program, I'm going to start backwards once I got in the program. Bill Burleson was 6'4", great pilot, but he used to tell people that there were only 2 requirements to get into the SR-71 program. You had to be really short and really dumb. He was 6'4", and he said that he was so dumb that they waived the height requirement. At that point, I would generally stand up and grab the microphone and say, I'm 5'7", standing in my flying boots, and I would say, I'm clearly the better qualified of the two because I didn't need any waivers at all. But back to my path to the SR, it was relatively direct. I grew up in New York City. I graduated from aviation high school in 1966. Welcome back there. And went into the Air Force. I'm sorry, got my bachelor's degree in aerospace technology, went into the Air Force in 1970, commissioned through Officers Training School, and went to NAV training. And after graduating from NAV training, my first operational assignment was in the RF-4C, which is the Reconnaissance version of the Donald Douglas F-4 Phantom aircraft. A lot of fun and just a great mission. But then I started hearing about this, at the time, quite secret, still, SR-71 program. I got very curious and applied for it, and several years later, I was surprised that I got selected. Did 4 years flying with Bill, great guy, and then stayed with the program another 6 years in various positions at headquarters and that sort of thing. When the SR was retired, I went to Space Command in Colorado Springs. I had a couple assignments in that discipline. And then retired from the Air Force in '93, did about 8 years in defense contracting, and 12 years in the nonprofit business, working with homeless families with kids in Colorado Springs. And here I am.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my hero shot there. I don't know what happened to the hair. It turned white, got a lot thinner, got a lot thicker in the middle. Randy Shellhorst is my RSO. He's now a police officer in Seattle, so if you're up there, you're speeding, he picks you up, say something about, hey, you're a hot boot, maybe he'll let you go. I don't know anybody recognize a lady in the middle. You gotta have some country western folks here. Coal miners of Auburn, Loretta Lynn. She's doing the USO tour. They got us up early in the morning, said you gotta go give a tour of the SR-71. She came over in a staff car, got out. Loretta Lynn, this is the SR-71 Blackbird. And it's actually a real dark indigo blue. She looked at it, said, looks black to me, got back in the car and left. I started out early on. My dad was an airline pilot. My mom was a stewardess, back when they had stewardesses, back when the days where you wore coat and ties. Started my flying career early at 17. Before I got in the Air Force, I was flying co-pilot. C-46 Commandos, 749, 1049 Constellations. Then I went to pilot training. Did fairly well in that. They kept me there as a first assignment IP, to where as a second lieutenant, I teach another second lieutenants, et cetera, how to fly airplanes. My first weapon system, F-111 Aardvark, swing wing fighter bomber. More so of a bomber than a fighter, obviously. Spent 78 to 82 at RAF Lake and Heath, used safety, flying the F model. Went back to Tactical Air Command, flying the D model out of Cannon from 82 to 86. Selected for the SR-71 program, stayed in the SR program from 86 to 1990 when the program was shut down. I went back to TAC after that, flying the EF-111A Ravens, the radar jammer version of the 111. Only to find myself flying out of Taif in Saudi Arabia during the first Gulf War, getting shot at where they could hit me. Didn't like that, and one eye open. Retired from the Air Force 1 July of '94 and got hired by UPS, flying freight. Started out flying freight, ended up flying freight. 22.416 years I flew for UPS. The last 12 years I've served as captain on 747s, 757s, 767s, and the notorious, infamous MD-11. After I retired, my wife said, no, you cannot have a motorcycle. So I got a little tip. You cannot have your own airplane. You'll kill yourself. Of course, the airplane I was looking at cost more than my house, so it kind of eliminated that factor. She said, you can have your own fishing boat. So I retired, and I got myself a fishing boat, fully equipped. Sidekicker, electric trolling boat, downriggers, fish finding. Put a lot of money into it. There I am with the first fish that I caught. Now you want to talk about price per pound. We got a long way to go. So I retired 3 years ago at age 65. I'll turn 68 this month, as a matter of fact. I'm doing a lot better now. That's the last fish that I caught this past October. So 28 pounds, 38 inches king salmon out of the Sacramento River. I know what the show did. SR-71, designed 1959. State of the art, still state of the art. There is nothing to compare to the SR-71 as far as flight characteristics. Crew members only rented the airplane. Maintenance owns the airplane. And I guarantee you one thing, if you see this pressure suit over here on the far side, you're all dressed up in that pressure suit, you're not going to do a walk around the airplane to see if all the nuts and bolts and everything are where they're supposed to be. You totally gave maintenance the ability to make sure the airplane was fully operational. There were only 3 things that could be deferred on that aircraft before it went to go fly. And I never had anything deferred on the SR-71. The airplane always was code 1 perfect when you climbed into it to go fly. Going to go fly, first thing you ever did was go see the tanker. Took off, went up, 25,000 feet thereabouts, 350 knots, refuel. Take off with about 35,000 pounds of gas, end up with about 80,000 pounds of fuel internal to the aircraft. Could not go anywhere without our tanker support. That's what it looks like from the boom operator's position, looking back down at the SR. This is post-refueling. Lew, would you care to talk to us about the Blackbird development history of the incident?
I sure would. Sure would. Thank you, Mac. I have had the privilege of working on all of those vehicles up there. I did spend one weekend on the M21. It was in the secret compartment behind where we were, and we could always get weekend work if we wanted it. And so one weekend I volunteered, and the only work they had was to go back there and work on that M21. And it didn't require me to do anything different than I was doing on the A12 Article 129 that was my workstation at the area. So, but in the development of all the, like I was telling you, the hydraulic valves, we're entering into an area where the hydraulic system is working above 500 degrees Fahrenheit. And nothing in the old age aircraft, old age, 360s, would stand up to the temperature. O-ring seals, no way. Aluminum plumbing, no way. We had to devise all kinds of new situations, and we were running seamless stainless steel lines, and we had to silver braze the connector ends. We had to make sure that the connectors, when they connected, would stay sealed, and so we'd have to vibrate them over 1,000,000 cycles, under temperature and under pressure. Here again, it was one of the most delightful experiences for somebody coming in that had never been there before. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know exactly what to expect. But we had criteria of things that we needed to inspect on. I remember the first time that I walked out and I saw the fuel tanks, the fuel sealers doing a pressure test on the complete body of the A-12. They had to pump it up with pressure so that they could soak the edges to see if there was any leaks anywhere. Oh, wow, oh my gosh, this is terrible. You got to do better than this. So anyhow, they did get it down to where they were so good under sealing that they just were able to keep it clean and neat. We had hydraulic oil that was so sensitive to oxygen, because if you fly at high speeds and the oxygen was to burn, it would varnish up little small valves, pistons that we would have in valves that would create suction or stiction. And so therefore, when given an electronic command to move, it would hesitate, it would stick, and could create a big problem with flight controls or runners. I remember one time, overlooking Iowa, I was just as shocked as I could be. I was standing out watching the engine start, getting ready for a flight, and the rudders went divergent. I've never seen that before. So, Frank Wheatoff, you know, he was our SAS autopilot guy. He said, "What are you going to do about that?" Me? That SAS said, "That's it." No, he says, "That's hydraulics, that's you." I went up and I told the commander, "Sir, you can't fly this airplane. Those rudders just went divergent, and you can't do that." And sure enough, we did. We canceled on the strength of what we saw back there. And sure enough, we had a bad valve or bad servo on one of the rudders that needed changing. So the development of the hydraulic fluid, these things we learned, we took a lot of caution and care with maintenance personnel to make sure that we had a nitrogen head on the hydraulic gigs that we used to simulate engine hydraulic pressure. And it was just such a marvelous piece of work. And I was there when we did the first flight control check, and I was there when we did the first landing gear hydraulic check and free fall. Rigging, some of the rigging, I got a chance to hold some cables while the riggers came in and did all the rigging. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else who has ever been on a development of a program that had as much joy and pleasure in doing the things that I got to do. So I really don't know how much time I've got here, but I could go on and on and on, because there was just nobody had done this before. We were the first. And Kelly would come often with what they called a dog and pony show, and he'd have a bunch of dignitaries trailing behind him, and he'd come through, and he knew most of those mechanics in there by name. And it was just a wonderful sight to see him coming in and how he reacted and responded to those mechanics that had been with him since Louisville, which was the first P-80. So all the time, okay, I will. But the development was just absolutely marvelous. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So these are the A-12. The Titanium Goose was the elevated rear cockpit trainer. YF-12, they built 3 of those, the interceptor versions. The SR-71A model we have here flew from 68 to 1990 for operational missions. And the high time airframe is tail number 956, the B model trainer, which obviously has got the highest performance. So kind of washed out, I'm not sure why. But basically, all the models of the airplane, 50 were built, and we ended up losing 32 of them for different reasons. This is the layout of the aircraft. These are the fuel tanks. The SR-71 has 6 fuel tanks. So from behind, they're the astronav tracker, all the way to the tail of the airplane and inboard of the engines is all fuel tank. As you see down here, this is where we would have our different sensors, tech cameras, ELINT, which is electronic surveillance, The nose of the airplane, you can put 4 different noses on the aircraft depending upon what the mission was. Temperatures. The aircraft range temperatures at speed and altitude, average temperatures over 550 degrees Fahrenheit. The glass next to my face up here in front of the airplane on the outside, it's like 660 degrees. Inside, it's about 560 degrees. Back towards the tail of the airplane, it's over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. All that temperature is due to friction with air molecules. Flying Mach 3, hitting the air molecules creates heat. And that was a big thing we had to work on. Lew, Kelly Johnson worked on. The aircraft actually grew in flight, 3 or 4 or 5 inches in length, 3 or 4 or 5 inches in width. As the aircraft heated up, they had to compensate for all that. Dave Burns, maintenance. This is your baby here, J58. Tell us about it.
The engines were the Pratt & Whitney J58 engine. I think the sea level thrust was about 34,000 pounds at sea level. And had 2 of them in the aircraft. Some of the unique things you have to deal with the engine was the engine oil was the lubricating oil. The oil had to be kept in a hot box to keep the temperature up to about 150 degrees. So it would flow like hot maple syrup when you serviced it. And you always service the engine right after landing, after the engine shut down. You service the engine oils so that you got the full service on the engine prior to the next flight. If you let it cool down, you had to heat the engines with external heaters to bring the temperatures up above 70 degrees. Preferably about 100 degrees in the nacelle to get the oil to flow more freely. If not, you could blow the oil pressure transmitter when you try to start, because it's so thick. When it got cold, it looked like real sluggish STP, and it was very thick. So you always kept it in a hot box to keep it fluid. Then another unique thing about the aircraft was there's no igniter plugs on this jet engine. Most jet engines have igniter plugs, spark plugs, that light the fuel when you do the start cycle, or the light the afterburner, or something like that, depending on the engines. And we use a chemical called triethylborane. It's a hyperfluoric chemical that exposed the oxygen ignites immediately, and you cannot put it out. You can smother it and snuff it, but as soon as you rake it back or open it back to oxygen, it ignites again. So it's a very hazardous chemical. And when the people have to come out and service the engines, there's 2 tank on each engine held 600 cc's of, we call it TEB, triethylborane. And so the people who serviced it had to wear fire bunkers, those luminized firefighting suits. And had minimum 2 people, one on the aircraft, one on the cart to operate the cart. And it had to be kept inerted with nitrogen at all times. And then you also had a fire truck standing by. So if you had a large spill, not a little spill, but a large spill on the wing of the aircraft, you would wash it off with the fire hose. Okay, the fire truck would respond, but only from the direction of the people servicing, because a guy could get knocked off the wing with a high pressure fire nozzle. So the way you controlled it, if you did have a leak, is you had a bucket of wet rags. And you just took the rag and dipped it in the water and you wrapped it around the valve or the line that might have the leak. And then you took it off the aircraft, took it down on the ground, away from the aircraft, and laid it down on the ground and just let it burn off, because you could not prevent it from burning. So you just controlled its rate of burn. But that was one of the hazards you had to deal with. The engine's really large, and to get access to the engine, you had to raise the whole outboard nacelle and outboard wing section. Think of it, a round cylinder, and split it in half, and then open it like that. And then there's the engine mounted inside, so the outboard wing is sticking straight up in the air. And he had a special hydraulic jack ground part surface jet that expanded in a ram that extended that wing up. But when you closed it, you had to button all the flapper plates and to secure the wing structure back to the aircraft. There was a flight control lollipop that you had to reinstall to connect the inboard and outboard controls. It's pretty intensive to change an engine, but you could do it in one shift. You could pop a wing, pull an engine, do an engine bay inspection if you didn't have any discrepancies, put the engine back in, get the wing down, then the next shift user would take it to the trim pad and do the trim runs. But it's a very good engine.
Thank you, David. Frankie.
Quick one. You saw the engine, it was on test stand at that, and you saw the glowing red. That's what it looks like from after refueling. When you go to afterburner, it stays that way inside the airplane for about an hour and a half until it's time to come down for the next air refueling.
Almost translucent. You can look through the engine. Very old.
I think Mac put this slide up there to trick me to see if I can get you guys from falling asleep with the spaghetti slide. But what it really represents is the tasking. When we flew the SR-71, all this technology that went into getting us airborne, it was for a purpose, and it was to gather intelligence. And there was a very elaborate, very well thought out process to get requests for the intelligence product that we delivered, the reconnaissance images or that reports, that sort of stuff. There was a very well thought out process to get the operating requirements or intelligence requirements from the user down to the wing where the crews would actually fly the mission. What we were most proud of, and I think the motivating factor for all the guys that flew and gals that worked on the airplane, guys and gals, was that we were not just flying training missions. Every operational mission that we flew in the SR-71 was to support national objectives, and the approval process for every single operational story included at a minimum approval from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Some of our missions that perhaps overflights of other countries, we did overfly Cuba on a pretty regular basis, would be approved at the presidential level. So the point to take away from this is there was a very established methodology to get the request for intelligence down to the crews and to fly and get the information back to the user. To do that, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but we called the airplane all-weather day-night capable. We could gather intelligence surveying over 100,000 square miles in 1 hour using various sensors that we had on the airplane. The noses that Mac talked about that you could detach from the airplane and change with the different sensors. One of them was an optical bar camera that swung, the lens actually swung from left to right, kind of shot from horizon to horizon. Another set of cameras could look out at detailed target areas for very fine detail. High resolution, we had for night and looking through weather capability, a high resolution radar called the synthetic aperture radar, which actually took black and white images through the clouds day and night. It didn't really matter. And that's what made the airplane so valuable to the users, because we didn't have to wait for good weather. One of the things that we found was very unique to the SR during the years that it flew was that it was able to provide wide area synoptic coverage, wide area coverage of a large area. And when General Schwarzkopf first started the activity during the Iraq War, he was screening for SR-71 coverage of the entire area of Iraq. And unfortunately, the airplane was retired a year earlier and he couldn't get it. Things have changed, but it was a very capable airplane. And I think, again, one thing to take away is that it was all-weather, day-night capable.
Thank you, Frankie. As you see over there, wearing a full pressure suit, we were flying well above Armstrong's line. The point being that if you had loss of cabin pressure in the SR, the suit would inflate and keep our little pink body at about 35,000 feet altitude. We're breathing 100% oxygen all the time. dependent upon this thing. We had a physiological support division that maintained these suits. They did an excellent job. The suit weighs about 50 pounds, all said and done. As I mentioned, spoke earlier, a standard parachute when you have to eject from an aircraft, so it has a 28-foot canopy. This aircraft, we had a 35-foot canopy just due to the extra weight of the pressure suits. This is an example of giving you an idea of what we do with the SR. We take off, immediately refuel with a KC-135 about 150 miles on the track. It was very important when you get to the end of the AR track to have full fuel tanks. When you hit the end of the AR track with exactly 80,000 pounds of gas. Accelerate up to speed and altitude, starting at the low 70s on up to 80,000 feet for your reconnaissance leg. Say across the DMZ of North Korea, as an example. Swing back out and descend back down to altitude, land back at Okinawa, Japan. That would be just a single loop sorting. Multi-loop sorting, in the blue here, you would take off, refuel, accelerate to speed and altitude, descend back down to 25,000 feet to another tanker. Very important again, to hit an AR track with full tanks of gas. Main point being that when you came back down to this tanker, you wanted to have no gas to get there. So you depart, climb to speed and altitude, make your recce run through the bad guy territory, descend back down to another tanker, accelerate to speed and altitude, back towards home base, descend, come back down and land. It gives you an idea of what the flights were like. Okinawa, Japan. Det 1 flew out of Okinawa, taking care of things in Asia. Beale Air Force Base, north of Sacramento, was a home base. And then RAF Mildenhall, north of London here, was where we flew for Det 4, taking care of things on the Mother Russia side on that part of the continent. These are the areas of operation. So over here, out of Beale, over here, Mildenhall, over here, out of Kadena. Jim Shelton, you're up on your Griffiths 72.
Well, I get the call, the commander called Gary Coleman, my nav, and I into his office and said, we got this special mission for you. It's going to take off from Beale, air refuel right away, refuel over the Canadian area, then down, fly down off of Portugal, and then Isle of Crete in the Mediterranean, and then fly down to Suez in the 73 during the Yom Kippur War, make a 270-degree turn around Cairo, cross the Israeli area, refuel at Crete, and then recover in England. Now they asked the SR-71 to do that because the Russians were supporting the Egyptians, and we didn't have we couldn't move a satellite out of its Russian orbit to get down there to cover and see what was happening on the Israeli side. So they asked, the State Department asked, could the SR do that? And that was going to be a nice little 8.5-hour mission. So while we're getting our briefing, the Wing Commander, General Howard here, and the maintenance crews get off the airplane in England, and the Brits say, you can't recover here. We rely so heavily on Middle East oil, we're not going to let your SR-71 land here after a mission supporting the Middle East area. So they canceled the mission. I didn't know that when they canceled the mission. They just told us, go home, go to bed, we'll tell you where to go the next day. So the next day, they finally found out that the task force that was down at Palmdale was going to fly some local missions out of Rome, New York. And they had a tank car of our fuel on the siding at Griffiths Air Force Base in Rome, New York. So the plan was, now we're going to fly to Rome, New York, and fly to there, go subsonic to the Canadian refueling, Portugal, Crete, Portugal, back to the Canadian refueling, 6 refuelings, and all of a sudden, instead of an 8.5-hour mission, it's 11 hours and 20 minutes. So on our way that afternoon, going into Rome, New York, the mission planners said, oh, higher priority mission. And they drew a straight line from the end refueling track to the holding fix at New York. Normally, they would avoid heavily populated areas and things like that. No, this time they said, oh, higher mission, drew a straight line. So we're up there, and it's a beautiful, clear night, and I told Gary, I said, I bet we're really creating a sonic boom, because I could look out my left window at night and see Chicago, and the right window I could see Indianapolis, and I just knew we were making a big boom. We made so much noise with that sonic boom of the airplane just going that straight line across the area that there was a mission was going to be 1 hour behind us. And just as they're about ready to push the power up to take off and come our same direction, they changed the route because they had so many complaints, a couple busted windows in there. Well, I get to the holding fix in New York, down there, and normally when you're 10, 12 miles out, you go ahead and turn your landing light on. Well, I do that, but if you're in clouds, you can see some reflection. Well, it was a beautiful, clear night, can't see anything. And just as I started to flare the aircraft, I said, oh, the landing light's burned out. So this airplane, when you take a look at it, it's got a little light about like this that shines kind of straight ahead. It's a taxi light. The landing light is about twice that size, and it looks down this way. So I hit the taxi light thinking, well, that'll provide some help. Now the wing commander that met us there said, ooh, they told me it was a higher priority mission. I didn't realize it was going to be so secret. You didn't even turn your landing light on until you got over the end of the runway. Well, I didn't want to tell them that no, it burned out, and that's a taxi light. So we go ahead and rest up again, and Gary and I shared the same bachelor officer's quarters room, and I was always one that took a Seconal sleeping tablet, 1 tablet before operational mission. Well, I'm also a snorer, so Gary laid over there saying, I know my pilot's resting well. They're going to be okay. I know my pilot is resting well. I can hear him. Well, we take off, and as we're going just before the creek refueling from Portuguese down through the Med towards Isle of Crete to refuel again, I decided I want to go ahead and have a little something to eat. I had taken 2 tubes of apricot. It's like a great big tube of toothpaste, and they have a seal on it, and then there's a little sharp point on this plastic piece you screwed on to go ahead and stick and put the feed port through the feed port in your helmet here. We take water, and so I took the apricot. Well, telling me, I totally forgot that the tube was manufactured at sea level. We fly at 26,000 foot cabin pressure, and so as I went like this, I had apricot going over here. I quickly stick it in my pockets, keep the apricot from going all over the place. So the next time I decided, well, I'm going to be a little smarter and not break the seal, screw it together, get it stuck in my mouth, and then one more twist, break the seal in my mouth. Well, the Egyptians tracked us. Gary told me what they're tracking us. They didn't try to launch at us, but they said they're tracking us. And then as we're heading down to Suez and getting ready for our 270-degree turn around Cairo, they lost us. Now we come back around, they picked us up again. So the newspaper article the next day said the Egyptians complained that there was some spy plane up there, two spy planes. Well, it was the fact they lost us, and one of them came back and picked us up a second time. Now, on the way back, you file an international flight plan, and the international flight plan left off at the Canadian area, and once we went through 45,000 feet, we became visual flight rules. No matter where we went, we were visual flight rules. Well, coming back, you come back through that same 45,000 foot hold in altitude, back into Canadian airspace, and they kept asking me, what type of airplane are you? And I asked Gary, I said, did you know what they filed us as? And he said, no. So I kept telling him, as filed. I wouldn't give him that we were in SR-71. I just kept saying, as filed. We get to the next control center, change frequencies. They asked the same question, what type of aircraft are you? And I said, as filed. Well, I get on the ground and find out that they had filed us as a KC-135. Now he's about 7 mile a minute airplane, and I had extra fuel. I was going almost supersonic going along there, and no wonder they were asking what kind of aircraft you were. But after 11 and a half hours, it came down, filled up with water, and took a long nap.
This is an example of moving aircraft. SR-71, we would swap them out at the detachments occasionally. Park Beale Air Force Base, refuel, go supersonic, come back down, refuel off the Aleutians, go in Kamchatka Peninsula, and do an imaging there, come down, refuel, go through the Straits of Japan, accelerate to speed and altitude, naval facilities, Vladivostok, go across the DMZ, North-South Korea, make a left turn, go back and land in Okinawa, Japan. It's an example of a reheat mission. There were no SR-71 flights over Russian airspace. You've heard that the SR flies over Mother Russia. No, we never flew over Russia. After U-2 was shot down between President Eisenhower and Khrushchev, they said, folks, we're not going to be doing that anymore. We did come real close here. North Pole is up this way. England, Mildenhall, Norway, Sweden, Finland. This is basically an east-west depiction of the Soviet Union. Up here, you'll hear guys talk about flying into the Barents Sea. This is the Baltic. This is the FRG, back before the curtain came down. Over here, again, the Kamchatka Peninsula, down to Vladivostok. Vladivostok. These are all flown locally, if you will, out of Kadena. Kadena is down here, up the Korean Peninsula, the Kamchatka Peninsula, Navy, Russian Navy. This is what Jim was just talking about. We're in the 73 war. This is Libya, April of 86, when they were after Gaddafi. All the post-strike was done by the SR-71. This is the Baltic, very tight confines for the SR to operate in. It usually came down the coast of Norway, made a left-hand turn through the Straits of Denmark into the Baltic. Again, looking at troop concentrations, initial sites, et cetera, swinging back around between the little island here and Sweden, and back down through the Straits of Denmark. Cuba, Nicaragua, flown out of Beale. Used to love to fly over Cuba. Usually it was on the 1st of May, and they had their parade. Go up and down the island, right down the middle of it, and image all of their fancy equipment that they got out on parade. Kind of like that. Mach 3, 70,000 feet, 73,000 feet. Cuba did great all that. Hey, in 87, late part of 87, there was a war going on between Iraq and Iran. And we needed to know what was going on. Here comes the first SRS, flying out of Kadena into the Persian Gulf. So we're from Okinawa, Japan, to the Persian Gulf, through the Straits of Hormuz. We are imaging these oil platforms that had been occupied by the Iranians. We make a turn through here. We were doing 68,000 feet, Mach 2.8, 45 degrees of bank. Making turns, tight turns up and down the coast here, looking for the gunboats that were coming out and firing on the oil tankers, looking for the silkworm missile systems, and then coming around to Bandar Abbas here, trying to find out how the Iranians were putting sea mines across the Straits of Hormuz and then the Gulf, trying to blow up the oil tankers. This mission, 4 of them were flown. Randy and I flew the 3rd one, which was an overflight of Iran. And that took President Reagan's authority to fly this mission. You're wearing that, just like Jim was saying, for 11 to 12 hours. When you get out of that thing, you want to take a shower, and then you're going to have some bubbly to celebrate. So this is post-mission books, we used to call it, myself around. May note the tail number, 975. Back behind us, the other hangar. And you'll see our scimitars on the tail, indicating the 975 had flown one of those Persian Gulf missions. All right, we're going to get into questions and answers time. So what we'd like to do, these are some of the topics we can discuss. You can ask questions about the aircraft, the engines, fuel, environment, aerodynamics, handling qualities, the equipment, the pressure suits, and more about the missions. So who would like to ask the first question of our panel? Yes, sir.
At speed. At speed, how tight a turn if you make?
At speed, what kind of turns would it make? The turn radius of the aircraft is about 75 miles. 75 miles to make a 180-degree turn. Next question. Yes, sir. The blue hat.
I noticed earlier when they were talking about the different models that were built, one was called, three were called interceptors. What did they intercept?
Blue.
Interceptor was a YF-12. We built three of those models, and they had missiles in bays where we have sensors on the SR, and it was very successful in the launching and flight test. We had almost a 90-some-odd% rate on our missile hits. It was just another good, wonderful program that was not bought.
Designed to go ahead and take care of the Russian bombers coming over the North Pole. We could come out of the northern tiers, get up to 60, 70,000 feet, look down, shoot down, and it was very, very accurate.
What missile did they use? Was that
Phoenix missile.
I really can't remember the name or the number of the missile, but there was four of them.
I think they took the radar and the missiles, and that's what they developed to put on the F-14. So that's where the F-14 got its Phoenix missile system from, was actually from YF-12.
Just a quick roundup on the interceptor. It was a great idea. I think Kelly Johnson probably tried to sell the idea, but the idea, as Jim said, was to intercept the Soviet airborne bombers going over the pole, and launch a nuclear tip missile into the bomber formations. One of the bigger problems they found, although it was a very effective technical solution, you couldn't keep an airplane like this on alert, as our maintenance guys have really talked about. It takes quite a while to prep an airplane, so you couldn't sit nuclear alert like the 106s and those guys did. That was really, I think, the practical end.
Yes, sir?
Can you speak to any missions where the reconnaissance that you obtained, whether you or your colleagues over the years, caused direct U.S. government military action?
Yes, the Persian Gulf mission that I just mentioned, we imaged Von Abbas, came back with OBC film, the individual who was in charge of loading the sea mines on the hovercraft to take them out to the ship, the Iranian ship that was going to take them out, drop the mines into the Persian Gulf, was identified. The individual put in charge of that was wearing sunglasses, short sleeve, epaulette shirt, had a mole on his cheek. It's an OBC camera film from 68,000 feet, Mach 2.8. Obviously, the ship was identified, and the ship was intercepted by the U.S. Navy, and was not allowed, obviously, and confiscated, not able to drop the mines. Jim Shelton's mission.
Yeah, the State Department had promised to replace equipment Israelis had lost. So they needed to know what was there. They went ahead and made a briefing for the Pentagon area, but they would show a tank where the track is off, and they'd say, well, there's a replacement we'll have to make, or there's a big black soot coming out of the side of the tank, so well, there's another one Israelis lost, because we were promising to replace the equipment. And the other thing they did, they pointed out to Golda Meir that she was further into the Egyptian area than she was letting the world know, and so she did back up a little bit from the photos when they said we have photos of where your battle line is.
Probably another good example of one of the missions I think that you flew, Mac, over Libya. Did you fly the? Oh, okay.
Jerry flew that, didn't he?
One of the guys here flew the Libyan missions in 1986. Mac talked about it a little bit. The important thing there was the F-111s and the Navy aircraft went in and bombed their targets in Libya. It was a pretty dawn raid. The SR-71 was tasked to go in there to determine whether all the targets had been hit or whether another strike was going to be needed. So perhaps more important than using the imagery to launch a strike, they were able to determine from that imagery that we didn't have to risk any more American lives by going back in and striking targets again. That's one of the beauties of knowledge is power.
Anybody in here see the movie Hunt for Red October? Oh yeah. Yeah, just about everybody. Well, that's one of the things we did in the Barents. We were flying up to the Barents, we're monitoring the Russian SLBM fleet. And with the ASAR's imagery that Frankie was talking about, black and white photos, I've seen the imagery. You could tell an Oscar, you could tell it was a Typhoon, you could tell exactly what the submarine was. You could paint a comm line going from the dock to the conning tower of the submarine. You could identify the hull of the submarine by missing acoustical tiles on the side of the submarine, like from the sail of forward 15 down 10, it's missing acoustical tile. And if you happen to know from a ground source the name of that submarine is Red October, and you would watch the submarine stage from pier to pier to pier as they were loading the torpedoes, loading the missiles. The day the vegetable truck showed up, it's going to sea the next day. Hello, Dallas, here comes Red October, get your butt in gear. That's what we did. We did more work for the Navy than we did just about anybody else. Next question. Sir, hold on.
You emphasized fueling a lot, refueling. Why didn't you just take off with full-tank fuels?
Why do we do that? I know, but that's easy.
Well, multi-engine aircrafts have what's called minimum single-engine control speed. The heavier you are, the faster that speed is. And we would always take off with a reduced fuel load for safety's sake, because we could fly while we're still on the runway, we could fly through the minimum control speed, so if an engine quit, you could still take off. But if we were totally full of fuel, then you're what they call dead man zone, because you have a tire limit speed of about 230, you have a gear limit speed, and so you've got to get the airplane off, and it's going to take 2 engines to get off, and if one quits before you reach that minimum control speed, your only option is to jump out of the airplane. So it wasn't that it leaked that much fuel on the ground and we had to refuel right away. We did it for safety's sake, for that minimum engine control speed.
Thank you. This sort of the...
Showed a slide saying no missions over the Soviet Union.
Correct.
Now I'm talking about the Barents and Kamchatka. How did you resolve that?
Okay, they weren't overflights. We were, we call it within, we got really close. You know, most of the, you know, we say international airspace is 12 miles from the coast. Some folks say, it's a lot closer than that. You know, some say, you were inside what we consider, you know, da 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 da. But the sensors were so good that we could look in, you know, 45, 50, 60 miles inland from being 12 miles off the coast. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, what was the probability of survival if you had to eject ignition speed?
how probability of survival if you're doing Mach 3 at 8,000 feet? Actually quite well. That suit would inflate, like I mentioned earlier, to keep you at your body at 35,000 feet. You would eject out of the aircraft in the seat, with the seat. There'd be a drogue chute would come out, and you would ride that seat all the way down to about 15,000 feet, as I recall correctly. And then the seat would say, hey, you're at 15,000 feet. He says, I'm tired of you sitting me. The seat would kick you out into open airspace. And then your parachute would open, and you would descend with the parachute. John?
Follow-up. What's the highest there's actually been a successful ejector?
How was Brandy Weaver?
Bill Weaver was a Lockheed test pilot. They were testing the aft center of gravity of the airplane, and they were up at 80-some thousand feet. CG very, very near the tail end, the aft limit, went into a turn, and the supersonic shock wave jumped out, called an unstart, and he said that the nose started coming up. He pushed forward on the stick, and all of a sudden he's out. The airplane broke up, literally through, he in the back seat or out. He came down on the ground, and when he hits the ground, he hears the guy saying, "Are you okay?" Now they're out in the middle of New Mexico. A farmer happened to hear the explosion, looked up and saw all the fuel mist up there at 80-some thousand feet, and then he saw two parachutes coming down. And Bill came out fine. His backseater, though, the violent pitch-up broke his neck. He was a short-statured man, and the headrest wasn't quite in the proper right position, and so he broke his neck, but his body came out fine. His story is on YouTube. They're very interesting. Like you say, though, but he totally survived. Now the farmer, though, has his helicopter, and he says, "I gotta get you to the hospital." So Bill, like a lot of straight-wing pilots, don't like helicopters. They got too many moving parts. Well, this farmer had that thing redlined like that, and Bill said, "Here I survived a Mach 3 crash, and I'm going to die in a helicopter on the way to the hospital."
Yes, sir. Total number of D-21 flights. Anybody got any idea of that?
That was a deal at that time.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of them.
From the airplane, the D-21, I think, was the third one that came, or the fourth flight. Fourth flight came down and hit the airplane. Once it hit the airplane, the pilot in the backseater jumped out. Kelly said no more on that airplane, but they did install the D-21 drone on B-52s, and they had some operational missions for a while, but they weren't that successful, so they canceled the program.
Yeah, my question was not just on the aircraft, but the camera that did the work. At that altitude, you were 12 to 15 miles above your target. How did they have a visual? Did you have a visual aid in the cockpit so you knew you were coming up on the target? And who was the manufacturer? Was it Fairchild that made that camera? And I mean, you can see the license plate numbers and so forth from 15 miles.
Mike, do you know who made the cameras? The OBC camera that we're talking about, the Horizon, as Frankie said, it sweeps left to right. And it also, what's awesome about it is it physically moves forward, locks on the target, and then it will slew aft to compensate for the speed of the airplane as the film's being developed. So this thing goes boom, zoop, zoop, boom, zoop, zoop, boom, zoop, zoop, boom, and the film is huge.
We did not see physical evidence in the cockpit of the camera going off. But what we did have is we had a map strip that was a photograph of a map taken at our location we had set up the film, and it was in the back cockpit. Anyhow, The map strip was programmed to travel at the rate of speed that the aircraft was, so that the RSO knew exactly the general location of the continent where he was.
So if you just got close, you knew that you were in the vicinity and that you wanted to photograph, just turn it on. How much film did that camera, or do you know how much film that camera was?
15 miles?
No.
It was huge. It was 15 or 16 miles. But the guy sitting behind you there is the A&S guy, and we didn't miss that mark very much. That A&S had us within 30, 40 feet of where we're supposed to be. If anybody wanted to know where we were flying, they could go back and look at the tapes, and they would give you a description of where we were flying at what time.
The tech cameras that were on the side that were more pointy for different areas as you're flying along. The navigational system was programmed to turn it on at this point and figure out what angle over here. Come on, they've got the camera out there. What was nice about that camera for its time was the fact that there was when you look at it, you'll see a mirror in there. And as you're moving along, the mirror would do this to go ahead and compensate for your speed so that you wouldn't have a blurred picture as you're flying across it. Very interesting, but there's one out here by the airplane.
He's flying out of Kadena. They called us in the next day. They said, "Hey, I want you to show you some of this." We did an OBC camera across the DMZ. They said, "Hey, why don't you come in and take a look at this?" So we go in there and said they had sanitized everything on the ground. The ground is in focus. But what we found interesting, we were making on this particular one was a east to west run across the DMZ, and they're looking at the film on the south side, over the South Korean side. And what they wanted to show us was that the ground is in focus and it's been sanitized, but what the blurry image is below the SR-71 is a U-2. So they got the U-2 doing his imagery, and the SR-71 flying over the top of the U-2. So what they ended up doing, they cropped that photo, and when they had a change of command ceremony of the U-2 squadron, the SR-71 commander would present the U-2 commander a picture of his airplane from the SR-71.
Initially when they would plan missions, the tech camera out there would turn off before you started your turn. Well, for some reason, the camera stayed on a little bit longer, and it's one of the North Vietnamese missions. And as they're over Hanoi, the camera is still on, and they're looking into Red China and saying, "Hey, this thing works in a turn." So after that, it really worked out fine for the later ones, looking into Russia and all those areas.
Yes, sir.
Someone explain the optical ability of the camera, how it was able to shoot through the atmosphere and clouds and get imagery? Could someone explain the optical ability of the camera system that was able to shoot through the clouds and accomplish the imagery that was being sought?
Through the clouds, no. That was all radar imagery. The advanced synthetic aperture radar, as Frankie mentioned earlier, and then I mentioned about the submarines, was basically a black and white photograph taken through the weapon. But there was no photo imagery. It was radar imagery.
Were there any threats by MiG-25s throughout the course of your service history?
They tried really hard. I think if you ever read Polanco's book talking about trying to chase down SR-71s, MiG-25 was Mach 3 capable for a short period of time. It would usually burn up the aircraft, burn up the engines, so it was not Mach 3 capable. What we would do when we were flying the Barents missions more than anything else, and in the Baltic, they would try to intercept us. I remember, vividly, we'd make our first pass up at the Barents, we'd make us turn off to the north, swing back around, and now we're heading, basically call it south towards the White Sea, and you would see from the undercast, you'd see a 4-ship of Soviet fighters break through the undercast, they'd be leaving contrails coming up, trying to intercept us. We're leaving the contrail, we're at 80,000 feet or whatever, doing Mach 3, beak to beak. We'll start to make a turn. They start to make a turn. All four of them would fan out. They'd fan out to see who could get a shot, and they'd come up hard. And I'd look down, and I could see them. You know, they can see me. I'm leaving a contrail. They've got IR sensors. The hottest thing in the sky is the SR-71, 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You're not going to hide it. Okay? So they can see us, we can see them. And I just kind of look down there and going, no, okay, now I can see a pepper speck in front of their contrail. I can see his airplane. I can see a pepper speck. I said, okay, that's close enough. Time to accelerate and climb. So we close the forward bypass doors a little more. A couple of clicks of trim on the autopilot. Accelerate 3.02, 3.05, 3.10, 3.12, 3.15, 82,000, 83,000, 84,000. Look down there and watch them, and they fall out of the sky. And they're done. So a lot of times I'll see things on there that say, we chased the SR-71 out of our airspace. Well, we were already through taking a picture. All right? Already got a picture of your mom and the mailman. Yeah, Lou.
While they were trying to track us upstairs, they also tracked us on the ground. When we first went to Okinawa in 1968, there was a Russian trawler, I'm told, that set off the coast of Okinawa, and then there were people on the island that could see the activities going on in the base because it was open on both ends. And we were told that every time there was laundry on the laundry line, that there was going to be a launch that day. And so we thought that we knew what we were doing, but we did look to see if there was laundry on the lines to make sure they were going to fly that day. So we were being tracked not only in the air, but we were being tracked on the ground.
When servicing the tab used on the engines, how is it replaced, or how was that chemical put inside of the tank, knowing how dangerous it was?
The tab was supplied to us in a pressure vessel that was inerted with nitrogen. It looked like a propane bottle, like a 5-pound or 20-pound propane bottle. It had a special valve system on top of it. And that had to be transferred to the holding tank on the cart, surfacing cart. And then that's also pressurized with nitrogen, keep it inert. And then it's when you hook it up to the aircraft, to the temp tank, there's a special valve they screwed on. They hook these QD lines, one's to push the tab up into the tank, and when it overflowed, come back out of the line, back to the cart. Then once they knew it was full, so they closed off the valves, disconnected the QDs. You always have a little puff of smoke every time you disconnect those. There's always a little bit of residual of tab, but it wasn't a problem. And then you just connected the lines, that it's like a dummy connector that you hooked it to keep the QDs secure. And you just handed the line down to the guy on the ground, and they went to the other side and did the same thing on the other side. But it was transported in a special vessel, a container that was pressurized. We could take it with us when we deployed with the tanker. Again, it's hazard, but you had to have some way of getting it off the aircraft. If you had a leak, it could get very serious.
Colonel Stampf, I'm going to guess you did a lot of things others didn't. What else did you do besides take pictures? Turn the camera on and off.
You're asking what the primary duties of the backseater, the RSO, are?
He's the spy.
Yeah, it was pretty much, the pilots were responsible for very good at keeping the pointy end forward. And that was really critical, providing a stable platform. What the backseater was responsible for to make sure that the sensors were programmed properly, came on when they were supposed to come on, if they weren't overriding systems. We helped the pilot with fuel management, monitoring, center of gravity, that sort of thing. We had the electronic countermeasures and equipment was all in the back seat, so we'd be able to track, as Jim was saying, when we're being tracked or locked onto or missile launch, we would have that information in the back seat. Of course, we were there to perform the duties that a co-pilot would in a two-seat airplane with flight controls in terms of checklist assistance and checklist management to help the pilot out if there were emergencies. So it was pretty busy. There was plenty to do. In fact, the one thing I'm really glad I didn't have to do very much of was navigating, because the guys that did our astro-inertial navigation system were phenomenal. I want to thank you for that. It was probably the most ingenious system, but our accuracy when we flew, coming back after a 5 or 6 hour mission, we were dead on all the time. We did not accept any cross-track error reading in the cockpit. So we were on the black line that we're supposed to be all the time. One of the things that I was saying that I was known for was that you've never been lost till you've been lost at Mach 3. Because for every mile you don't know where you are, you're 35 miles further away from where you think you're supposed to be. And fortunately for us, the ANS did a wonderful job of keeping us on track.
The backseaters basically ran the show. They knew when the cameras were coming on. They knew when the event needed to be done. They maintained the astronaut tracker, backed it up with the INS. They controlled the onload of fuel from the KC-135s and started with 4 pumps, 3 pumps, 2 points, whatever was required, to where you would end up at end of the aircraft with full tanks. I'm just trying to fly the airplane or the tanker. I've got one engine in minimum afterburner, a foot full of rudder, trying to keep the airplane straight, modulating the other throttle, trying to stay on the boom. If the tanker happened to go into a turn, I'm getting a stick shaker and a stall warning horn. That's how, the edge that the aircraft is flying. The tanker is going as fast as he can. And he's limited actually by boom speed. The air refueling probe is actually the limiting factor on the speed of the KC-135. We could actually go faster when we refueled off the KC-10s. But he controlled all that. At my backseater, we get a pressure disconnect. We're like 5 seconds from NAR track. I get a full tank pressure disconnect and time to accelerate up to speed and altitude. And that's what you needed to do. They ran it. They ran the program. You're not going anywhere without your RSO. As I may have mentioned earlier, you go through training with the same guy. It's almost a year training program. You are married to your back seater, married to your front seater. I know my back seater more than I know my brother. That's how close you become. You go through all your training together, and when every operational mission, you fly with the same person. If one of you gets sick, the other guy ain't flying. They bring in the backup crew will fly the mission. So that's how close it was. It was an excellent program. Sir, you have a question?
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. From my understanding, the first missions, you would do the reconnaissance mission, and then you would have to land and then unload the cameras for staff to interpret the data. But I believe later on, soon in the 70s, you eventually had a system that allowed you to communicate or to send, to transmit data in the air. Could you just describe this process, and did that become a problem since radio silence was a big thing also?
We did not have data link to the ground stations or uplink to satellites to the SR program, which is one of the reasons the program was shut down in 90. One of the minor reasons. The U-2 did have data link capability as long as they were in range of the ground stations. When the SR program shut down, they sent a U-2 up to the Barents working for the Navy, looking at the Navy, the Russian submarines. Well, they had the U-2 up there. It took them forever to get up there because they're only doing 400 miles. It took them forever to get up there. They're at lower altitude. The winds at altitude can be up to 200 knots due to the Coriolis effect of the rotation of the Earth. Ever thought about that? The Earth is rotating, the winds start swinging around. Well, the U-2 got up there, and he's got so much crab into the wind trying to maintain ground track, he can't manage the targets. And he can't data link the information back to the ground station because he's so far north. So instead of flying a 4.5-hour SR-71 mission, now you got an 11-hour U-2 mission with no data. Okay, which one do you want? Young man here?
What was the top speed of the aircraft in miles per hour?
I think it says right up there on the wall, 2,193.167 miles an hour. Going pretty quick. Yeah, Frank.
I'm glad you asked that question because 2,200 miles an hour sounds fast. Mach 3 sounds fast. All of us kind of have that feeling of, wow, that sounds really fast. But the best way to make it, to get a feel for what it really means is, was done by one of the Lockheed engineers on the back of a napkin once and later kind of mathematically proven out. If you could set up a hypothetical race between the .30-06 rifle bullet and take that rifle, have it overhead Los Angeles, pointing toward New York, and fire the bullet and allow it to maintain its muzzle velocity, that is, you don't slow it down for gravity or drag. And you have the SR-71 at Mach 3, not even its maximum speed, but at Mach 3 go over the coast of Los Angeles heading toward New York at the same time. The SR-71 would get to New York 3.5 minutes before the bullet. And when you think about a bullet this big, an 108-foot airplane outside, grows about 100,000 pound nominally, that really gives you a sense of what Mach 3 really is.
Standing in the back of the room is Mr. Ed Yielding, who owns the speed record from the West Coast to the East Coast, 1990. Ed, give everybody a wave. Ed's going to be on the panel, the next panel. Glad to have you here.
I want to point out, though, it's the Blackbird's record. I was just lucky to be the pilot that day.
Now, some people, you get more steered, you actually go faster than you really want to go sometimes. Got another question, sir?
This gentleman.
I've heard you say that when you had some missiles shooting at you, you could speed up, and you have mentioned as much as 30.15. But in the world speed record, I guess the question we'd have is how fast would it really go? Is that as fast as it would go, or are we still keeping secrets?
I don't believe there's any secrets anymore. Operationally, we were limited to Mach 3.3. The limiting factor on the aircraft is actually compressor inlet temperature, 427 degrees centigrade. That's what they told us. They told Ed Yielding it's 450 degrees centigrade.
We're up to 30 minutes.
Yeah, so 3.3 was the maximum speed that we could take the aircraft up to.
I do understand, at least I've heard, that the skin of the aircraft was designed to contract and expand due to altitude. How was that done?
Well, if you look out at the airplane, you'll look underneath the wings, you'll see the panels are corrugated. Rumor was that Kelly Johnson got the idea from looking at a Ford Trimotor, but I don't think that's true. But the aircraft would have, the metal would actually expand horizontally in length, like I said, 4 to 6 inches. You know, so I got a story that I don't think I better tell the kids here. Anyway, so, you can ask me after I really don't get to.
The other question was, I think the inside the fuel tanks didn't have a rubber liner. No, they were just sealed with rivets, and one of the reasons that they only put so much fuel on the ground is it leaked out on the ground. So let's get it up and get it heated up, and if that is correct.
The airplane told there's no fuel bladder. The skin of the airplane is actually the fuel tank, and they would have sealant they would try to put between the joints and try to keep the fuel in, but it didn't. Sometimes it worked pretty good, sometimes it didn't work very well at all. 981 up at Hill Air Force Base Museum is the front end of a YF-12 and the back end of an SR. They made it together, and I guess that thing leaks like a sieve. It's really, really bad. And I believe, Dave, when you put 45,000 pounds in the gas to start with, and it leaked out to 35 by the time we took off.
Wasn't that bad. Fuel leakage was not a real major issue. It wasn't a safety factor. The fuel was not dangerous to you. You couldn't ignite it. It's JP7 fuel, kerosene-based fuel that had additives, had a high flash point around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, you know, in that ballpark. And but when you talk about refueling, the tanks were integral tanks. The structure of the aircraft was the tank, and it had sealant. But what happened when you got to cruise at skin temperatures is around 600 degrees Fahrenheit, and when the tanks run dry, and there's nothing in there to help absorb the heat, it's like being on the inside of an oven. The sealant would just bake and turn real brittle, and eventually it'll start deteriorating, breaking loose, and then that opened up allowed fuel to seep through the seams. Now, we had to do it seems like about every 6 months we would do a leaky valve on the aircraft. You fill the tanks all the way up to 80,000 pounds with liquid nitrogen on board the aircraft. And with the liquid nitrogen on board, that's changed the gaseous nitrogen to inert the tank, but it also put a head pressure on the cells, and that amplified your fuel leaks. And you had a special glass beaker that was graduated in centimeter or ounces or maybe whatever. But anyway, you just held it underneath the drip and timed it for like 15, 20 seconds, and you measured how much leak rate was on that particular drip, and you went and you mapped it out on a chart that was the shape of the aircraft, where all your leaks were at. If it got real bad, or supervision, stuff like that, we would look at it and say, this thing's leaking a lot. You know, you're leaking, a couple thousand pounds in about 12-hour period. So you would send the aircraft into fuel cell maintenance. When we did that, it took anywhere from 30 days to 6 weeks to get the aircraft resealed again. And it was great when it first came out. You fired 3 or 4 hot missions, and it was leaking almost as bad as it was where it went in. So you just tolerated it. And in Okinawa, we flew a lot of hot missions over there, and you have to wear rain gear underneath the aircraft sometimes because it leaks so much fuel, and the fuel's you're walking around in an inch of fuel laying on the floor, slushing around. You got a new pair of boots issued about at least 6 months because the fuel would just eat the stitching in your boots, and so it really just made a mess. That was our issue with it. It made a mess.
Okay, we got time for like one more question.
What's the fuel mileage?
Fuel mileage? That's a good question, actually. At speed and altitude, we're burning about 2,000 pounds per 100 nautical miles. If you came down to subsonic 2 engines at 14,000, 15,000 feet, you're doing about 6,000 pounds per 100 nautical miles. So that's single engine, 6,000 pounds per 100 miles. 2 engines, about 4,000 pounds per 100 nautical miles. So the airplane actually burned less fuel the faster it went. I realized the majority of the thrust is actually coming from the ramjets, not coming from the J-58 turbine. A lot of times, we'll be in minimum afterburner, and bypass systems are set, the airplane is just accelerating and accelerating and accelerating, and sometimes you got to figure out, I'm going too damn fast to make the turn to go through the Straits of Denmark into the Baltic. I had that situation happen to me one time. I'm just going, got to go through on the black line at Mach 3.0 and make the left-hand turn going through the Straits of Denmark, and we're doing like 3.2, and it wants to go faster and faster and faster. So I told my back seat, we got a thumb switch on the throttles that opens the forward bypass doors on the ramjet that bleed air external to the engine nacelle to actually create drag. Okay? So I told my back seaters, I've never done this before, I don't know what's going to happen, hold on to your shorts, Here it comes. 3, 2, 1. I'm popping. I'm going to pop it. It's like you're doing 90 miles an hour down the freeway and you take your foot off the accelerator. Whoop, slowed right down. 3.0. Close the doors. Made the turn. All right. That's enough for the questions. Here we want to do is talking about the people who designed the airplane. Ben Rich. You see his photograph there. Ben Rich was the mastermind of the ramjets. Kelly Johnson, the man responsible for the Blackbird series and a lot of other aircraft. I mentioned before, the Lockheed Constellation designed by Kelly Johnson, the P-38 Lightning, the P-80 jet, all Kelly Johnson's creations, F-104. You ready? Here we go. This is a tribute to Kelly. Please enjoy.
Dear Kelly, you and I have never met. I'm not a former SR-71 pilot or RSO. I wasn't a member of your design team at the Lockheed Skunk Works or on the assembly line that built the Blackbird. Nor was I a member of the Air Force at Beale, Mildenhall, or Kadena, who kept the Blackbirds flying. I'm not even an airplane buff in the classic sense. I'm just a person that had the privilege of being around your SR-71 Blackbird, and it was an experience I will remember intensely for the rest of my life. There's just something about your Blackbird, Kelly, that words don't adequately describe. Anyone who has been near a Blackbird and felt its presence knows what I'm talking about. It's a feeling in your gut, and instantly you want to be part of it. Part of what I call the Blackbird family. Today, Kelly, you are being honored for your design work on the SR-71, and justly so. To me, the SR-71 is not only your greatest aircraft design, it is perhaps the greatest aircraft ever built. I've heard it said that you considered the Blackbird the most fascinating challenge of your career. No wonder. It was a design that was so advanced that everything that touched it had to be new. New manufacturing processes, new tools, new materials, a whole new approach. You built an operational stealth aircraft a decade before most of the world had even heard the term. It was a design so far ahead of its time that it retired before time could catch up with it. In times of crisis, the Blackbird provided 6 presidents with a unique and critical view of the world. The Blackbird served this country for just over a quarter of a century. In that entire time, it stood in a class of one. To me, the Blackbird is much more than a technical marvel. It's an airplane that gets inside you, an aircraft that causes the adrenaline to flow just by looking at it. Kelly, your Blackbird is the stuff dreams are made of. It's the model plane sitting in a young child's room, proof that everything is possible, that the sky isn't the limit. And it's the poster hanging on the office wall of a middle-aged engineer, testimony that yes, even in the real world, miracles do occur. The SR-71 embodies all that excites people about aerospace. Its crew seems part pilot, part astronaut. The Blackbird itself appears part airplane, part spacecraft. The typical Blackbird fan is a cross-section of America. It's your grandfather, your niece, your son. It's the wide-eyed young kid that buys an aircraft book at the National Air and Space Museum. It's the family that traveled hundreds of miles to an air show just to see a Blackbird in person. It's the people on the Air Force Base that stopped what they were doing to watch an SR take off. Everyone, every time, no matter how many times they'd seen it before. And it's the pilot who last flew the Blackbird 20 years ago, who has the look in his eye that says, I flew the best aircraft ever made. The look that can barely contain the desire to get in an SR just one more time and light the burners. When Blackbird 972 made its final record-setting flight to Dulles Airport, I watched the television with mixed emotions. This was the Blackbird's final flight. An aircraft that was the very definition of speed and power would fly no more. But my sadness was tempered by the knowledge that this plane would now truly belong to the nation, coming to rest in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Now millions would be able to do what I had done, be near a Blackbird, be part of the family. Kelly, in the years to come, whenever I want to experience your airplane's majesty, I will remember the time I spent with your Blackbird, the smell of JP7 fuel, the feel of it on the soles of my shoes, the sound of an air starter wind up, the TED ignite, and I'll put on the film that we shot during those incredible weeks in 1987. I'll watch it, feel it, be part of it again. Because in movies, Kelly, like in our memories, your Blackbird will fly forever. Congratulations, Kelly, and thank you. Devin Hawker, Assistant Cameraman, Blackbird, the movie.
It's the end of the program. Thank you very much for attending today. At 1 o'clock, here's about 30 minutes. Barry Glasser over here by the computers. He's going to be